Okay, so without further ado, Rich Archbold from Intercom.
Thanks very much. Hey everybody, my name is Rich. I'm actually one of the directors of engineering at Intercom here in Dublin. For anybody who doesn't know what Intercom is a customer communications platform, basically full stack of customer support, CRM, email marketing, and a bunch of other stuff, all actually rolled up into one app. This is actually what I spent Saturday last week doing, coming up with actually the most up-to-date diagram of Intercom as it stands at the moment. It's basically a Rails app with lots and lots of databases, and sounds as if it actually sort of was like Shopify was maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. This is actually one of the coolest things about Intercom. We're actually shipping code roughly about anywhere between 70 and 100 times a day. We topped out at like 106, 107 times a day early on in January. And I was actually looking at my LinkedIn, and I've now realized I've been a manager for twice as long as I've actually been an engineer. And I guess it's probably no surprise that most of the time actually these days I spend trying to figure out how to keep teams who are kind of like growing all actually aligned for success. And obviously the answer to this has loads and loads and loads of different parts to it. But the bit that I'm actually most interested in talking to you guys about today is about core values. And the reason I picked this is because over the last kind of 2 years or so, I've been involved with two absolutely completely different teams, both of whom actually went from pretty good to absolutely amazing after we introduced core values into them. And I'm going to tell you about both of them today. So so I guess the first thing is like, what actually are core values? Why do they work? Core values, I guess you can think of them as a small, short set of simple principles or ideas which actually guide the behaviors and decision making of a team. And in that way, I guess you can actually think of them as checklists for team behaviors. And it turns out checklists are actually pretty fucking magical things. Who here has heard of or read this book before? Cool, no surprise, a bunch of ops people love this book. So this book, if anybody hasn't read it, I hugely recommend it. In this book, the guy, Dr. Atul Gawande, he was asked by the World Health Organization to reduce the amount of deaths which happen in surgery unnecessarily every year. And they told him, by the way, you have basically you basically have no money to do that. He was like, right, okay, that sounds ridiculous. But he actually wasn't any ordinary doctor. He had been studying failure for years and years and years, and he had actually read this paper by these two philosophers who said that basically all human failure occurs for one of two reasons. The first is failures of ignorance. And failures of ignorance occur because the knowledge required for how to solve a problem doesn't yet exist. Failures of ineptitude occur when the knowledge exists, yet we fail to apply it correctly. So he went, right, I'm actually going to solve the failures of ineptitude thing, or basically reduce them. And so he went about studying a bunch of different professions where really complex multidisciplinary teams do their work amazingly well over and over again. He looked at skyscraper construction, he looked at airline flight, and as he looked at those things, he found at the heart of them were checklists. Small, simple, many different checklists, all actually used at the right time in the right place. And so he actually rolled out the World Health Organization's first ever safe surgery checklist to 8 different pilot countries, from Rwanda to Johns Hopkins University, and across the board he was able to reduce the amount of people dying unnecessarily. So it was like pretty awesome, pretty clear. Checklists prevent failures of ineptitude in pretty much any team. Doesn't matter how complex it is, how much technology or software you actually have around you. Checklists really help prevent failures of ineptitude. And as I said, coming back, core values for teams basically are like checklists for teams. That's why if you have them, it's actually worth doing. They actually really work. So I want to come back to, I guess, my journey with core values. Started too many years ago now, when I was at Amazon and even at Facebook. All of the organizations all actually had their own core values. But I think I actually took them for granted a little bit because they were actually always there already. I never saw the kind of before and after effect of core values. I guess there's one kind of little thing to note here. You've got me as Darth Vader in my career progression. Here's some like reasonably recent family photos, which kind of might lend a little bit of credence as to why I picked that. So about 2 years ago, I joined Intercom as the director of ops. I had a pretty clear job spec for like the most important things, which was cool. And I joined a company that had so many of the right ingredients there in place already. But my team wasn't quite firing on all cylinders. Like, we knew things were going reasonably well, but things actually weren't quite perfect yet. We could see that our top-level availability and cost metrics were okay, but they weren't great. Roadmaps existed, but generally weren't followed or adhered to. Stuff actually seemed to whack us from left field all the time. Anything we actually did do tended to run late, and generally people just weren't feeling as good as we actually felt we could do. So we had an idea, or I guess I had an idea of how to fix it. But what we actually did was went off-site, had kind of a long chat about it, and what we decided to do was we were going to introduce some team-level core values and see how they worked. So here's the first one, super easy, considering everybody's actually warmed up with emojis after Shopify talk. This one's security, availability, performance, scalability, cost, prioritize for maximum impact. And really, prioritize is the key thing there. It basically enable us to say yes to a few projects and no to a lot of projects. Like example, somebody actually would come to us and say, hey, I need a new data warehouse. It's really, really important for the business. And I could say, yes, it is really important for the business, but it's not security, availability, performance, scalability, or cost related. So I will help you talk to our senior leadership and get your actual project funded or figure out where it actually sits in the prioritization stack, but probably my team aren't going to be the ones that actually do it for you. This is the second one. This one's really easy as well, right? So it's faster, safer, easier shipping. I showed you guys at the top, or I showed you our 100 times a day deploys. Right around this time, we were doing kind of 70, 80 deploys a day. We knew this was absolutely magical. We knew it was like a strategic advantage for our engineering teams to be able to deploy code, fix stuff so quickly. So we were determined we were actually going to fight to keep that true. And when you actually have your deployment system working so fast, so frequently, you actually aren't tempted to fix things in kind of a hacky, crazy way. That the fastest way is actually to do it the right, normal way. So that was like one of the other really good benefits of having this fast, safe deployment chain. This was the third one. I think this is the easiest one for you guys to decipher. Zero-touch ops. So all of us had worked in ops teams which had actually been burned out before or carried really heavy technical debt. We were 100% determined never to let that happen again. And I think we actually did some pretty interesting things to help us actually get there. We started ruthlessly measuring the amount of pages we were getting each week and took very specific goals to reduced the number of pages by 20% quarter over quarter, and just actually empowering ourselves to actually prioritize that and telling everybody else in the company this is actually one of our 4 values. People actually got it, and we started to see huge improvements in our volume of operational pages. We also actually started to track unscheduled work. So every morning after stand-up, I would ask the guys who actually did any unscheduled work yesterday, and I would actually bucket it down to the half an hour, and bucket it by category. I would measure who was actually doing it, whether it was inside or outside of office hours. Once anybody had worked 10 hours of unscheduled work outside of hours, I would force them to take a day's holidays. But also every Friday, I would be looking at what are actually the categories here and making sure we're actually taking proactive projects to cut them out. Because these actually might be things which aren't actually paging us. Maybe it's just like you're getting ad hoc requests, or you're actually noticing stuff on graphs or whatever and digging into it yourself. So it was super important for us to focus on. And being a manager, I love kind of pivot tables and all this type of stuff. And what we actually started doing was trying to actually predict, based on a trailing 10-week average, how much unscheduled time we had done. So we actually tried to predict, based on a trailing average of the last 10 weeks, how much unscheduled time we thought we were going to do for this week. We actually subtracted that away from the amount of engineering hours we allocated for doing proactive projects, obviously measured it, took it as a target. And the interesting thing here is we managed to go from 78% usable engineering time up to 92% usable engineering time. So working in an ops team where you actually get to spend 92% of your time working on project work, we thought was pretty cool. One of the other interesting things here is that bottom 50%, 74%. So we used to track how much time we were spending on like roadmap work versus proactive scaling and ops work. And it actually worked out 50-50. It stayed pretty steady, like 55% in Q1, 48% in Q2, 48% in Q3. And we also tracked the percentage of work we actually got done on a weekly basis. So 74%, 76%, 72%. Multiply those two numbers together, divide them by 1, and you actually get your planning multiplier of 2.7. So basically, every quarterly roadmap, we'd ask the guys, how long do you think this project's going to take? Oh, it's 2 weeks. Cool. I will put it down as 6 weeks then in the roadmap as the budget, because you know it's going to take 2.7 times longer on average over the space of a quarter. And guess what? We started hitting every single one of our goals for the quarter. So 2.7 is definitely this like magical number for multiplying estimates. Certainly over sort of a medium period of time, it's definitely, some people would say, oh, you know, it's a 2-week project and we happen to have a super quiet 2 weeks, and they nail it in like a week and a half. But over the course of a quarter or whatever, definitely that kind of like 2.7 number was super important. This is the last one. This was the last core value. It's a pretty easy one as well. Run less software. So 30% of our engineering team are ex-AWS. We're like 100% bought into the cloud. Trying not to run any of our own databases wherever possible. Trying to actually limit the amount of new software or new infrastructure we actually bring into the platform. We were 100% committed to keeping it as simple as possible. And we actually were going to be the gatekeepers, or at least the questioners, for whether or not we actually introduced any new infrastructure components. So we have some cool designers in the company. We got them to like do up some nice posters for our values, put them up on the walls. And the other thing is, so looking at all of the places where things actually weren't going well in the past, we also came up with a second checklist then of this is actually where we need to use these core values to help guide our decisions and behaviors. And the first two are all around decision making, and the last one's all around culture. So anytime anybody new join the team, after about their second or third week, I'd sit them down, go through the values. And also, at each of our quarterly offsites, we would also rederive the values from first principles in those sessions to make sure that all of the values really actually still were relevant for the team. And over the course of a couple of quarters, we saw our availability go from good to pretty great. We started to achieve some really good economies of scale in our infrastructure costs. Finance love this one. And we love this one. Our operational pain actually started to drop really considerably. Like, we were getting down to 1 or 2 pages a week out of hours, which was like really great. And sometimes no pages at all at the weekend, which for a fast-growing, super small startup at the time, we thought was pretty phenomenal. So core values are awesome. You should totally use them. You should also have a checklist of where to actually use them. You should rederive them from first principles every so often. You should teach them to every new person who joins. You should also read the checklist manifesto as well. But I said there was 2 great teams that I was actually part of that used core values. This actually was the second one. This is actually the most fun one. So I actually have my own personal team. I was actually telling my wife all about this. She actually helped us come up with our own family values. Found actually some cool ways to teach them to the kids. And yeah, they worked a treat. And that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, lovely talk. So whenever I pull up a spreadsheet in one of our team meetings, everyone goes like, right? Because we try to do the same sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that? Because I try to tell people like, look, you know, your work sucks. That's why we call your salary compensation. And we're here to achieve a goal within like a planned goal in a measured time, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to track some of these things, but there's still a lot of resistance against that. Please give me a magic bullet.
So I think the magic for me was me actually making it as absolutely frictionless as possible to people. And people actually don't even see the spreadsheet for the first while. You're just saying, look, I'm going to do all of this myself. I'm just going to ask you a few super quick questions. It's going to take a minute after stand-up. You actually build up some of your data yourself, pivot table it yourself, and don't actually try and force it on people until you actually have some really credible, interesting actual results out of it to share with people. And I thought once people started to see the numbers after several weeks, and you can actually give them like a useful personal kind of number to track, like a number that's kind of really great for the team around percentage of usable time. I think that was it. It was just like, wait a while, take all of the burden on yourself first, and then show them interesting stuff.
So how do you ask people, tell me what you did, without making it sound like justify all of your time?
I think you got to start like, I think that starts way beforehand, when just basically kind of managing people and letting them know that you absolutely trust them, that you're kind of giving them continuous feedback all of the time. You know how hard people are working. You're kind of telling people that, look, I'm not asking you to tell me what you did yesterday. That's basically what stand-up is for. What you do yesterday, what are you doing today, what are you blocked on? But it's more of the, like, how many hours did you spend yesterday that was unscheduled, like was, I wouldn't say unproductive, maybe that was annoying to you, that was kind of distracting to you. That's basically the stuff I want to try and help you get rid of, or help us get rid of. So I don't think anybody ever felt it was justify your day yesterday. It was more like, what are the things that I can help you not have to do next week or tomorrow, whatever.
Cool, thank you.
One of the things that kind of concerned me a little bit about asking people to track the time that they're spending on unscheduled things is it seems like it is an indicator that the unscheduled things are being spread across the team rather than kind of focused on one person servicing interrupts. So kind of how do you handle interrupts? What's the size of your team?
So I think at the time the size of the team was about eight or nine people. We had a dedicated on-call who was supposed to be dealing with all of the interrupts, but like a bunch of times you'd have people tapping somebody on Slack and saying, hey, you actually helped me with this last time, you know, any chance you could help me with this? Or you'd actually have people who were specialists in various things. So I guess it's kind of the nature of an ops team that people think you are there to be interrupted sometimes as well. And like, that was actually basically the intent of the core values as well, was to actually kind of be a shield for that, right? And say, we're not here to be the catch-all team to do absolutely everything. We're here to do these very specific things that are like really, really important to the company. And there's a bunch of other stuff which absolutely needs to get done, but maybe you actually need to do it for yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Just to go back to the how do you get your engineers to not throw things at you when you put up a spreadsheet. I don't think there's any. I mean, you're not going to get them to buy into it unless you can demonstrate that there is benefit to them for it. So, and you probably shouldn't be doing it unless there's benefit for both them and the organization. So, I think part of the trick's the wrong word. Part of the way you need to approach it is to kind of show them what the benefit is. And I guess that's the, hide it for a while and then show them a nice number bit. But, if what you come up with is something that actually helps them as well as helps the organization, then, it should follow from there unless you're dealing with a bunch of psychopaths.
Yeah, totally. And like with some of that unscheduled work tracking or some of that like pager tracking, you're actually able to show people, look, this thing you actually thought was kind of mildly annoying and has actually been sort of bugging you for the last couple of weeks, it's actually pretty fucking big.
Yeah.
How about, as a team, we actually stop doing some roadmap stuff? I'm not going to say this team is dreadful because they actually aren't going to hit their goals for the quarter. I think we absolutely won't hit our goals for the quarter unless we actually take some time, dig into the stuff which is actually causing you guys problems and getting you actually paged out of bed at night or getting you distracted out of your flow of work you were doing for the day. And let's actually empower ourselves to actually go and fix that first and treat that as first class work. And then after that, everything should be easier then after that, right?
Yeah, if you can pitch it right, it sells itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm curious how you came to that 2.7 multiplier. Like, what metrics did you use to calculate that? It's a little too specific to have been like a trial and error, arbitrary, let's see what works, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so what we actually tracked was so we actually worked 2 weekly sprints called Hustle. And in each of these sprints, so that's that, I've got these 2 numbers, percentage of roadmap commits that were actually, or percentage of weekly goals that were actually roadmap related. So we might be having I think one of the times we actually did a goal of, say, moving to VPC was moving out of Classic into Amazon VPC. So that would actually be a roadmap related hustle commit. But then we've actually looked at some graphs and seen Memcache needs to scale. So we're actually going to scale our Memcache by factor of 2 or factor of 3. So I could see here 50% of on that week, 50% of our goals for the week were roadmap related. Say we were doing 1 VPC one and then 1 Memcache scaling one. And it turns out that week we actually only completed half of them anyway. The other things ran late or we got hit by some outage or something like that. And I took those 2 averages. So on average, we would spend half of our time working on roadmap related stuff. But we would only ever complete 75% of the work we actually thought we were scheduling. Multiply those 2 numbers together and you get 37%. Invert 37% and you get 2.7. And so that was actually how I got it. And we would actually track those numbers on a quarter by quarter basis. And it was super interesting that even though our unscheduled work went down, the amount of time we spent on roadmap related work stayed the same. And I think it was because we actually got better about taking stuff that was previously unscheduled operational work, we now took it into scheduled operation work. And even though actually we were getting better at like more throughput, we were actually getting more done, we were still only ever hitting 74%, 76%, 72% of the work that we were actually planning on doing. And I think that's because engineers are naturally bad estimators and estimate how long it takes to get a working prototype rather than how long it takes to get a fully operationalized deployed system. So the numbers stayed remarkably steady over 3 explicit quarters. We measured it here that I felt safe enough to go, right, that's fine. We will just use that number going forward.
That's a very thorough answer. Thank you.
No worries. Any more questions? Cool. Thanks very much.